Hello, this lecture is going to cover ancient Mesoamerica. So I'm going to share my screen. We're going to jump right into it. All right, so this lecture is the early civilization in Mesoamerica. Mesoamerica is located in present-day Central America, which is Mexico, Panama, Costa Rica, Belize, those countries. So far, we have covered the ancient Mesopotamia region. We have also covered the Nile of ancient Egypt. We've covered ancient Greece. We've covered ancient India. We've covered ancient Africa. And we've covered ancient China. The final piece of the ancient world is Mesoamerica. This is one of the most forgotten regions of the world, but also one of the most advanced, but in different ways. So there's such an impression, a colonial ideal that Mesoamerica is a weak civilization. That is not true. It's just advanced in different ways compared to ancient Egypt and Greece. After this, we will move into ancient Rome, which I'm so excited to present to you. But after today, in this lecture, we will have covered all of the geographic regions of the world according to the ancient world, like where ancient civilization begins. Of course, there's other regions like Australia, Madagascar, all of these other places. I'm not saying that those places don't have civilization. I'm saying that the major cornerstones of the ancient world are the places that we've covered, and this is the final one. So, of course, it's going to share some of the similar characteristics as other pieces of the ancient world, but it's also going to be somewhat different. So buckle up, and I hope you enjoy this. So the objectives of what we're going to demonstrate today is the knowledge of major civilizations of the Western Hemisphere, which include the Maya, the Aztec, and the Inca, by describing the geographic relationship with an emphasis on patterns of development in terms of climate and physical features. We will describe the cultural patterns and political and economic structures, and the essential questions that we're going to answer is what were the characteristics of the Maya, the Aztec, and the Incan civilizations. So the Olmec is where we start. They appeared in Mesoamerica around 1200 BCE, and they are located in the hot, swampy lowlands of the Gulf of Mexico. They are Mesoamerica's mother culture, and they are the first advanced civilization. They farmed along muddy riverbanks and had large cities that center of religious rituals. The oldest city was San Lorenzo, which was built in 1150 BCE, and it had earthen mounds, courtyards, and pyramids, large stone monuments. And La Venta in 900 BCE was also constructed, and they used mounds as tombs, and it was the center of Olmec religion. So their culture was planned and ceremonial centers, ritual ball games, and elite ruling classes. Their religion was carved colossal stone heads that represent their gods. They were polytheistic. Remember, poly means more than one, and mono means only one. They worshiped a jaguar spirit, which represented a powerful rain god. They had a large trade network amongst each other, and they traded iron ore and they traded stones. They declined around the 300 BCE era, and there's no real answers as to why, because there's not a written record. The Maya develops right near the Olmec in this area here on the Yucatan Peninsula, and it stretched from southern Mexico into northern Central America. They included dry shrub forests, jungles, and mountains. The civilization growing at the same time was the Olmec. The classical period of the Maya civilization existed from 250 to 900 CE. They had spectacular cities, Tikal, Copan, Palenque, and Chichen Itza. They had a sophisticated civilization, and they were the most advanced of the Mesoamerican civilizations. They built temples and pyramids, and they had a complicated calendar. The civilization included Central America and southern Mexico, and they had an unknown decline date. So the Mayan political structure was composed of city-states. They were ruled by a god king. They believed in hereditary rule, and they often claimed to be the descendants from the sun god. These cities served as centers of religious ceremonies and commerce. The cities featured pyramids, temples, palaces, and stone carvings. They also had a ball court, so think of like a stadium, where they played a game that would maintain the cycles of the sun, the moon, and bring life-giving rains to their regions for their crops. The city-states were often at war with each other, and the captured soldiers became slaves to each different city-states. Think ancient Greece with the Mayans. So Maya correlates to the ancient Greeks. Nobles were used for human sacrifice. Independent city-states that were linked through trade and alliances. There was very few outside trading partners in the Mayan culture. They exchanged local products, salt, flint, feathers, shells, honey, cotton textiles, jade ornaments. With their agriculture, they believed in maize, which is the ancestor to corn, beans, squash. They slash and burn farming as well as sophisticated farming like on terraces. They were successful farming led to the acclamation of wealth and development of social classes. Their currency was the cacao bean, which is cocoa, which is like chocolate, right? They literally, that was their currency. So think of when I pull out a Benjamin, well, I'm poor, so a Washington, $1, and I buy a cup of hot chocolate. I am buying the ancient currency of the Mayans culture, which is kind of cool. So the social structure was rulers, nobles, townspeople, and farmers. So the rulers were the descendants from the gods. Does this sound familiar? I feel like I've done this before. They passed rule onto their eldest son, which was hereditary rule. The nobles were the leading warriors and the priests. Townspeople were skilled artisans, officials, and merchants. And farmers were most people. They lived on tiny plots. And men were fighting and hunting, and women were homekeeping and raising the children. This is a Mayan temple. So Mayan religion, life was in the hands of the divine powers. Each day was a living God whose behavior could be predicted with the help of a system of calendars. The polytheistic, which means, as we know, more than one God. They had the god of corn, death, rain, war, and they associated with 4 directions in different colors. The supreme god was the Tizama, which was good and evil. This is the jaguar of the night. Oh, sorry, I got that wrong. Idzama is the god of good, and the evil is the jaguar of the night. I apologize. So practices, the Mayans worship gods in various ways. Offerings of food, flowers, and incense. They practiced human sacrifice, believed it kept the world in balance. At Chichen Itza, they threw people into the deep sinkhole lake along with gold and jade. The calendar, the Mayan religious belief led to the development of the calendar, which is mathematics and astronomy. It indicated a sophisticated mathematics and astronomy, and the base calendar on observation of the planets, the sun, and the moon. The math systems include the concepts of zero. They believed time was a burden carried on the back of a god. The accurate calendar needed to know which god was in charge of what day and of what event. It was a 260-day religious calendar, consisted of 20 13-day months, but a 365 solar calendar, which consisted of 18 20-day months, 365 days in the year. Does that sound familiar? That's our years. Used both solar calendar and the sacred calendar. An only trained priest could use this and read. They used it to foretell the future, and it helped identify best times to plant crops, attack enemies, and crown new rulers. Some of the writings, there was the most advanced systems in ancient Americas. It stood for whole words and symbols. It's hieroglyphics, just like in ancient Egypt. They wrote on bark paper book called a codex, and the Spanish assumed they were evil and destroyed many of the codexes when they colonized ancient America. Only 3 of these remain. This is some of the symbols. So what happens to the Maya? In 800 CE, the Mayans suddenly abandoned several cities, while other cities continued to thrive. The invaders, or the Toltec, arrived. Most historians now believe that the disappearance was due to increased city-state warfare, overpopulation, disease, and drought and famine. So the population was too high, and the crops couldn't maintain. So this is some of the traits of civilization: religious beliefs and theocracy, independent city-states, and intensive agricultural practices. So leading to their power, a united culture, loyalty to the king, wealth and prosperous culture, production of more food, which feeds a larger population. And this is some of the weaknesses that lead to their decline. Because of their religious beliefs and theocracy, many physical and human resources funneled into religious activities instead of back to the people. Independent city-states caused frequent warfare, which occurs between these little kingdoms. An intense agriculture contributed to soil depletion, and population growth created a need for more land, which there wasn't any. Teotihuacan is the first major city in central Mexico. It is the place of the gods. It's located near Mexico City and built during the 1st century CE. There's 125,000 residents at its height, and the pyramids of the sun and the moon. At the center was the Avenue of the Dead, which lined with 20 pyramids. The Pyramid of the Sun was the largest, over 200 feet tall and 3,000 feet wide. People lived in apartment block buildings around this avenue, and most residents were farmers, and it was the center of the trade network. Obsidian was the most valuable item traded during in this region. This is the Avenue of the Dead with the Pyramid of the Sun here and all of these small pyramids. We will visit this on Google Earth along with Chichen Itza on Wednesday. So I'm excited. The Toltec dominated central Mexico from 900 to 1200 CE. It was the center of the empire was at Tula. They were a warlike people who worshipped a fierce war god and demanded blood and human sacrifice. Some of their characteristics was they built pyramids and palaces, carved tall pillars in the shapes of warriors, and the legend of Quetzalcoatl, which is a war legend. Through trade and conquest, the Toltec ruled as far as the Yucatan Peninsula, which is in the Mayan culture. They greatly influenced by late Mayan culture, which is exactly what I was just saying. So the Aztec migrated to the Valley of Mexico into the 12th century CE. Mountain basin, several large and shallow lakes, accessible resources, and fertile soil. In 1365 CE, they built a capital at Tenochtitlan on an island in the middle of Lake of Texcoco, which is modern-day Mexico City. It took conquering spirit of the Toltec to the extreme. War was at the center of government and religion, and they ruled until the 1500s when they were conquered by the Spanish. Cortez, baby. So the rise of the Aztecs. The sign would come from their god of war and of the sun, and the god would tell them that when they saw an eagle perched on a cactus growing on a rock, their journey would end. And at 1325, attack from other peoples drove them into the swamps where they would see the sign, and they built Tenochtitlan. It took 100 years to build this city, and while they were building their capital, their warriors conquered modern Mexico, and a collection of semi-independent territories were governed by local lords and ladies. They were tributary states who paid their dues to the capital. Tenochtitlan, by early 1500s, was an extraordinary urban city with a population between 200,000 and 400,000 people. It was larger than London at the time. It was connected to the mainland by 3 raised roads or causeways. Smaller cities ringed the lake, and the streets and the avenues connected the city center with residential areas. The canals intersected the roadways, allowing canoes into the center of the city. This was a huge market at the center of the city. The market had agricultural produce, avocados, beans, chili peppers, corn, squash, and tomatoes. It was a massive walled complex at the center. The main structure was the giant temple, a giant pyramid with twin temples on the top. By 1500, there was 4 million people that lived in the Valley of Mexico. A monarch had the power, claimed he was a descendant from the gods, and the ruler was assisted by a council of lords and government officials. They formed a triple alliance with other leading city-states. This is very sophisticated, guys. So when people tell you that ancient Mesoamerica wasn't sophisticated, that's not true. I mean, this is proof. This is not true. The power was based on military conquest and tributary states. They let local rulers rule tribute states, demanded tributes of gold, maize, cacao beans, cotton, jade, and other products, destroyed rebellious villages or captured slaves if they didn't pay their tribute. At time of Spanish conquest, they ruled over 38 provinces. The empire stretched from central Mexico to the Atlantic and the Pacific coasts, and an estimated population was between 5 and 15 million people. The social structure was the monarch, nobles, commoners, indentured servants, and slaves. So the monarch or the emperor had absolute power. The nobles were a part of the Council of Lords, government officials, military leaders, religious leaders. And commoners were farmers, warriors, craftspeople, merchants, which were the elite. And indentured laborers were landless laborers that just worked on the commoners' lands, and slaves were captured in war. The Aztec social structure: boys, men were warriors from the moment of birth. Girls were not equal to men. They could inherit property and they could enter into contracts with others, though. Most worked at home. They raised children and weaved textiles. And then they also had priestesses. Trade and agriculture. The trade network, it was a huge market at the heart of the city. Products brought in from all over Mesoamerica, larger than most in Europe at the time. The agriculture was produce grown on chinampas, which is farm plots built on marshy fringes of the lake. The religion and culture. Religion was an important part of Aztec life and adopted many beliefs from the Toltec civilization. Religious practices centered on elaborate public ceremonies meant to communicate with the gods and win their favor. They were polytheistic with over 1,000 gods, and most important rituals involved the sun god. I can't say that name. I'm sorry. They had to be nourished with human blood to make the sun rise every day. Human sacrifice carried out on a massive scale. Thousands were led to the altar atop the great temple, and priests carved out hearts using obsidian knives. They believed the day of reckoning was coming, so human sacrifice would delay this reckoning. It required lots of captured slaves in different battle tactics to capture live prisoners. They did everything they could to capture people live so that they could kill them for sacrifice. The feathered serpent was Quetzalcoatl, which is a legend about a Toltec prince whose return from exile would be preceded by a sign of arrow and a sapling. When Aztecs saw the sign, the cross on the Spanish, they thought it was the Quetzalcoatl had returned. So if this explains anything to you, it should be this. The Aztec feared the Spanish, not because of their armor or of those things, but based on their religion. They believed that Quetzalcoatl had returned, and that it was a serpent who was going to kill them all. And they saw that on the cross of the conquistadors when they landed in the Aztec territory. So their calendar was derived from the Mayan system. It had two main calendars, a sacred and an agricultural or solar. Had 5 unlucky day periods known as the Nemontimim. Both calendars started on the same day and was marked by a great ceremony of fire. The sunstones, the calendar was a huge sunstone, which measures 13 feet and weighs over 24 tons. It contained information about the days and the gods. So in 1502, Montezuma was crowned emperor. The Aztec Empire began to weaken because of overpopulation, too many sacrifices, and provinces rose up against the Aztec oppression. By 1519, when the Spanish forces under Herman Cortez landed in Veracruz, they arrived at Tenochtitlan and received a warm welcome from the monarch Montezuma. Montezuma, thinking they were their gods resurrected, gave the Spanish gifts of gold. The Spanish took Montezuma hostage and pillaged the city in 1520. The Aztecs revolted and fought the Spanish, but natural disasters such as smallpox brought by the Spanish ravaged the Aztecs. This is called by one of the modern day historians as the American Holocaust. This also happens on mainland North America and modern day U.S. And it's basically this huge decimation of Native American peoples, not by war and conflict, but by diseases that the Europeans brought over that Native Americans had not been immune to. Cortez leveled the pyramids and filled in the canals and rivers and built a new city on top of the ancient Teotihuacan, which becomes Tenochtitlan, which is the modern day Mexico City. So this is some of the traits of the Aztec civilization. So they had religious beliefs and theocracy. The strength to this was it was a united culture with loyalty to the king, but the weakness was many physical and human resources were funneled into the religious activities. They had a powerful army, which added land, power, and prisoners for religious sacrifice, but this weakness was the need for prisoners, changes warfare style to lead less deadly and less aggressive. So the army wasn't powerful in a way of battling. They were powerful in a way of capturing. The traits of the civilization was the empire of tribute states, which provides wealth and power and prisoners for religious sacrifice. But the tribute states are extremely rebellious and need to be controlled. And without a powerful army from above, they can't do that. So these are the objectives we talked about. The essential questions we answered was that there some of the different characteristics of the Mayan, Aztec, and Incan civilizations. That is it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this lecture. This ends our unit on the rest of the ancient world. Starting our next unit will be ancient Rome. I'm so excited to get into Rome with you guys. And this will wrap up the first trimester, which covers the ancient world in a global context. So until next time, have a great day. Thank you.